now on that.
Good morning and good afternoon. I'm Leah Schuneman, Deputy Director of the Transatlantic Security Initiative in the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security here at the Atlantic Council. On behalf of my program, as well as the Eurasia Center, I'm pleased to welcome everyone joining us online for today's event on Black Sea security. At the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security, we work to develop sustainable, nonpartisan strategies to address the most important security challenges facing the United States and its allies and partners. The center honors the late General Brent Scowcroft's legacy of service and embodies his ethos of nonpartisan commitment and to the cause of security, support for U.S. leadership in cooperation with allies and partners, and dedication to the mentorship of the next generation of leaders. The Eurasia Center's mission is to enhance transatlantic cooperation in promoting stability, democratic values, and prosperity in Eurasia. A large part of what we do is focused on helping policymakers come up with innovative solutions for today's most pressing security challenges. Whether it's through the reports we produce or through convenings like today, we are aiming to strengthen transatlantic security, foster regional cooperation, and bolster all of our collective security. Amidst promising renewed transatlantic cooperation, and as the United States pursues bilateral strategic stability talks with Russia, I believe this is an opportune moment to cooperate on the many ways that Russia is challenging stability in Europe. Today, stability is acutely threatened in the Black Sea region, a strategic crossroads between Europe, Asia, and the Caucasus that has become increasingly militarized since the Russian annexation of Crimea in 2014. Control over the Black Sea is at the core of Russia's revisionist ambitions to restore Russia's international power and to hinder European integration on its borders. In addition to Russia's ongoing war with Ukraine, Russia has built up its regional military presence and frequently violates safety norms, like the incident we saw in June when Russian fighter jets buzzed the UK's warship and then launched a bizarre disinformation attack claiming it had dropped bombs on a NATO ally. As we all know, Russia aggressively built up its land forces on Ukraine's border in Crimea earlier this year. Since the annexation of Crimea, Russia has been steadily increasing its military presence and capabilities on the peninsula. Even though Russia's land forces have withdrawn from the border this summer, its naval buildup in the Black Sea has still increased, and naval modernization is a core element of Russia's strategy for altering the balance of power in the region and for projecting power also into the Middle East and Africa. Russia is additionally using non-military tools to increase its influence here and undermine transatlantic and regional unity, including using diplomatic tools, disinformation, predatory energy policies, and many others. Putin's infamous July 12th op-ed highlighting Russia's territorial claim on Ukraine is one example of Moscow's aggressive disinformation strategy impacting the Black Sea region recently. Despite the threat posed by Russia on NATO's southeastern flank, transatlantic policymakers have mostly focused on hardening defenses in NATO's northeast. That is not to say that NATO is taking no action. NATO ships routinely operate in the Black Sea to include naval heavy exercises like those seen last month, Sea Breeze and Breeze 2021. And NATO also has a tailored forward presence in Southeast Alliance territory, mostly consisting of land forces headquartered in Romania. NATO and its member states also support its partners, Ukraine and Georgia, in various capacities that complement regional cooperation. As part of the work by the Transatlantic Security Initiative and the Eurasia Center, focused on deterring and defending against the threats to the Euro-Atlantic region, we hope to better cohere a shared understanding of the threats in the Black Sea, how we can address them, and how we can enhance security cooperation in the region. Towards that end, we're pleased to convene today's event and grateful to our speakers for sharing their time and expertise. We have with us on this lovely virtual stage a distinguished group of panelists today, including experts and officials from the Black Sea littoral states of Bulgaria, Georgia, Romania, and Turkey, as well as the United States. Just a few housekeeping notes before we dive into the fun part. This event is on the record, and we are broadcasting live on Zoom, as well as the Council's website and across our social media platforms. I encourage all of you watching to ask questions using the Q&A function on Zoom and join the conversation on Twitter by using the hashtag StrongerWithAllies or tweet us at Atlantic Council. To take the discussion forward, I will now turn the virtual floor over to my colleague, Ambassador John Herbst, Director of the Eurasia Center here at the Atlantic Council. John, over to you.
Leah, thank you very much for that brilliant framing of today's discussion. We have a wonderful panel with us today, and I'll briefly introduce them. We have Mr. Alton Bulin, who's the Director of South and Central Europe at the Department of Defense. We have First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lasha Darsalia from Georgia. We have Dr. Khan Kasapoglu, the Director of Security and Defense Research at the Center for Economics and Foreign Policy Studies, and also a fellow at the Jamestown Center with whom we work regularly. We have Ambassador Elena Papadorova, the Vice President of the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria. We have Dr. Harlan Ullman, a noted foreign policy commentator and a senior advisor at the Atlantic Council and the chairman of the Kilwan Group. And we have Irina Zidaru, the Director General for Strategic Affairs. I should point out that Dr. Kasapoglu is coming from his boat on the Aegean Sea. Director General Zidaru is coming from the Black Sea coast of Romania, and Ambassador Papadorov is coming from the Black Sea coast of Bulgaria. So this is truly a literal event. Okay, and with that, I'd like to start by asking Dr. Ullman, how do you define the challenge of Moscow's force projection in the Black Sea since seizing Crimea? Actually, Harlan, before you answer that, I should point out the one country that is not part of today's discussion is Ukraine, and that's because we did an event on Ukraine's Black Sea problems with Russia about a month ago. So please, Harlan, over to you.
Thanks, John, and thanks for convening this really important session. We think because NATO is not termed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization for nothing, and its focus has always been the northern part of Europe. But quite frankly, the Black Sea is Russia's strategic center of gravity for many, many reasons that are historical as well as both political and indeed strategic. It is the gateway south, it is the gateway to the Middle East, it is a gateway to the near abroad, and it's a gateway to Asia. And we have neglected, I think, enhancing our security there. What's interesting, however, is that we don't recognize sufficiently the vulnerabilities of Russia's military in that region. While we think it's very powerful, it is in fact surrounded. If the Russians were going to move west, they'd have to go through Ukraine and they'd have to go through Moldova, which would be very, very serious challenges. And while they are modernizing their Black Sea fleet, it still consists of many Cold War vessels that are probably older than some of our panelists. What we really need to do, in my judgment, John, is to come up with a strategy for the Black Sea, in which I think the centerpiece would be the ability to threaten the Black Sea fleet in Sevastopol, which means we're going to have longer range cruise missiles. Whether they will be based in Romanian, Bulgarian, or Turkish facilities remains to be seen. We also have got air policing stationed out of MK Air Base in Romania, which I think is very, very important. And the issue here is that we don't need to escalate, we don't need to provoke, but I think if we use common sense steps that the Russians will perceive precisely like that, I think we can bring more pressure and more influence to bear to make sure that Russian interests remain in the Black Sea and do not spread beyond.
Harlan, that's provocative and on target. Thank you very much. Director General Zidaru, Romania has been outspoken about the Russian challenge in the Black Sea. What are your major concerns?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Herbst. So speaking now live from the Black Sea coast of Romania, like 15 miles since away from the MK military base Harlan Ullman just mentioned, I could say that we are seriously concerned about the consistent build-up which happened around the Black Sea after the illegal annexation of Crimea. And what we have seen this April, the consistent build-up and the way this massive build-up influenced the whole security situation in and around Ukraine, with serious implications for the Black Sea, starting a very important situation around the Black Sea, and especially as this region is at the end of the eastern flank of the alliance. Our main concerns rely on this militarization of Crimea, on the security implication, on the consistent attempts towards harming the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea. We have recently seen two such events against the HMS Defender and against the Evertsen Dutch corvette. And also, we are seriously concerned about the hybrid tactics the Russian Federation is consistently employing in this area. We see the stability and the security of this area as being of utmost importance for the security of the alliance as a whole, because this has been shown a serious and consistent preoccupation of the Russian Federation. Our main concerns are related to the way this situation is influencing the projection of power of the Russian Federation towards the Mediterranean Sea and towards the eastern flank NATO scene as a whole.
I'm sorry. I think you may have lost your sound. Hmm. All right. Why don't we move on to the next question while we try and reconnect with the Director General? Okay, Ambassador Papadorova, how does Bulgaria look at Moscow's increased presence in the Black Sea? Can you hear me? Please unmute yourself.
I did.
Good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Thank
please.
you. I was just saying, Ambassador Herbst, that this is a simple and easy question, which, however, elicits a complicated answer
Please.
for me as far as Bulgaria is concerned. For a number of reasons. Bulgaria has been traditionally cautious and regrettably oftentimes ambiguous regarding the Russian threat in the Black Sea region and even beyond. I'm sorry to say that there is practical, and I'll be giving you a very honest opinion now, which now being out of active duty, I will not stick to political correctness, but that will give you a more real picture of the situation as it is. So I was about to say that there is practically no solid domestic internal political consensus on this issue. And it represents a huge problem when time comes to practical decisions or actions. This problem is rooted back in history and in the way in which the facts of Bulgaria's liberation from Ottoman occupation have been consistently, very skillfully and manipulatively spun to the general public over decades, I would say over a century. And while individual experts and politicians have been most outspoken about the growing risks to Bulgaria's
Ambassador,
national
we're having
security
trouble hearing
as a
you again.
result of a growingly aggressive Russian behavior area. Uh, I'm unmuted. I'm
Can,
unmuted. Can you hear me?
can, now we're hearing you again. Please repeat what you said the last, say, 30 seconds or so, so we hear it again.
I was saying that I don't know how much you heard, but I'll repeat my last phrase. I was saying that while individual experts and politicians have been extremely vocal and outspoken about the growing risks to Bulgaria's national security as a result of an increasingly aggressive Russian behavior in a number of areas, and I'm not referring only to security and defense, but I would add here energy, real estate buyout. Must tell you that in the house I'm now residing on the Black Sea coast, right next to me, there is how do you call this? A fenced off holiday village, which has the Russian flag there, next to, of course, a Bulgarian flag. But you can see these all over down on the Black Sea coast. What I'm trying to say that we see literally a claim of Russia of having stronger hold on Bulgaria than it should have. So I did mention real estate buyout, but I would say also disinformation, espionage, our most how should I put it, cumbersome modernization of the army, which has been going on for much too long. And finally, we got our first strategic purchase with not even a full batch, but half a batch of F-16s. So all of this adds up to a very complicated domestic process of decision making. So although we've had very many vocal people, vocal experts, Bulgarian governments have been, as a rule, rather shy about qualifying Russia as a national security.
We've lost you again, but we heard, I think, your main point about talking about Russia as a national security danger. So I think we'll turn now to Dr. Kasapoglu. Historically, Russia and Turkey have been the two principal powers vying for dominance in the Black Sea. But in recent years, we've seen periods of cooperation and competition between Ankara and Moscow. So is Ankara concerned about Moscow's buildup in the Black Sea?
Supported, well followed in Brussels?
Uh, Sorry, I think you addressed the question to me, Ambassador.
Yes, please go ahead, Dr. Kaspoglu. And Ambassador Papadorova, we're having trouble hearing you, so we'll move on to Dr. Kaspoglu, and then we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Well, I think that's a great question to start with, especially when it comes to Turkish-Russian strategic relations with ups and downs, because we see a lot of compartmentalization between cooperation and conflict in Turkish-Russian relations and the state of the nature of these relations. To be very striking, what we are talking about is the very first NATO nation that downed a Russian aircraft in the aftermath of the Cold War. And that same nation within 3 years became the first NATO nation that procured a Russian strategic SAM system in the aftermath of the illegal annexation of Crimea. It is the first NATO nation that had Azerbaijan against Russia-backed Armenia. And from my standpoint, it was the perfect moment of de-Sovietization of Azerbaijan. It is the one and only NATO nation that took out an important proportion of northern deployments of the the Arabic-speaking Red Army, the Syrian Arab Army, again, another Russia-backed satellite of Moscow. But it is also the only NATO nation that came under the CAATSA sanctions by the United States because of its procurement of Russian S-400 systems. So we have a lot of dichotomies in Turkish-Russian relations that cannot be easily expressed or understood by reducing everything into the simpler stance. But just to go with the flow of the first round, to keep it in a nutshell and to keep it, I think, the best way precise, there are three factors that would contribute to Turkish strategic thinking. One, the Russian intervention in Syria is enhanced, facilitated, and enabled by the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The Russians built an arc of steel all the way extending from the illegally annexed Crimean Black Sea Fleet HQ all the way down to Tartus. And I think some Turkish strategists see that there is no Mediterranean escadra of the Soviet Empire anymore, but it is the Black Sea Fleet of the Russians that are maybe never be closer back through the history to their strategic aim of projecting power from the Black Sea all the way to the Mediterranean, and it is detrimental to Turkish strategic calculus. The second thing is the Turkish hesitancy, or some part of Turkish statecraft hesitancy, let's say, on the US calculus as to the Black Sea, that pertains to the idea of having more NATO presence in the Black Sea, more American involvement in the Black Sea would make Turkey snatched up in a great power competition game between the Russian Federation and the Western camp led by the United States, which would turn Turkey into a battleground. Actually, that is something interesting because that was something that I heard when I was in the Baltics, that some skeptics of the aggressive politics vis-a-vis Russia in the Baltics told me that their main fear was to be turned into a battleground between the West and the Russian Federation, because either way, whoever the winner would be, the battleground would be the Baltics. And I think Turkey perceives utmost threat from turning the Black Sea, or pursuing policies that would turn the Black Sea into a geopolitical flashpoint and a battleground between East and the West. And the last point, and I'm gonna leave it here, is that the Gerasimov's sensational announcement as to the change of military balance in the Black Sea is, I think, a threshold for many Turkish strategists as well, because in recent years, right after a war game in the southern military district area of responsibility, General Gerasimov openly told that up until that moment, it was Turkey that was the major naval power in the Black Sea. And then it was the Russian Federation, especially with the calibrization of the Russian Navy. So I think Turkey is in a moment of ups and downs with Russia, and this is the nature of the relation. But when it comes to the Black Sea, the Turkish foreign policy can be formulated between the strategic and traditional conservative hesitancies of going more, green light with the Western allies, and not pissing off the Russians, if this is the right term. But also on the other side of the coin, I think with the Gerasimov Shoigu military leadership and the Slovakia in the Kremlin, with the Russian intervention in Syria, I think it is at least to some of the Turkish strategic community, it is clear that it is not only Russian threat perceptions by the NATO enlargements, but also greater plans in the eyes of the Russian elite that goes well beyond defending the homeland, but extends to the Russian imperialistic power projection in the Turkish hinterland, actually.
Thank you. That was a nice comprehensive answer. All right, Deputy Minister Darsalia, much of Moscow's recent provocations have been directed at Ukraine, but how dangerous is Moscow's growing naval presence to Georgia?
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, before I start, I really want to tell you that I'm in Western Georgia in a small village where I was meeting the IDP community, and these villagers offered me this room generously. You can see the flags behind on a wall. It was not specially hanged for this meeting. The room was already like this, so it shows the general attitude even of those, not only of this small village, but of the whole Georgian community to the outside world generally. And I really wanted to highlight this. But regarding the question, thank you one more time for the opportunity to share with you our vision regarding the ways to enhance the Black Sea security. Of course, we are extremely concerned with Russia's growing military presence in the South Caucasus and the Black Sea region. Over the last 2 decades, we have been witnessing Russia step-by-step implementing its overarching strategy aimed at expanding its exclusive sphere of influence in the region, which Russia claims as its own backyard and wants to extort from the West the recognition of this illegally constructed so-called new reality. Invasion of Georgia in 2008, subsequent occupation and extensive military buildup in Georgia's occupied regions, annexation of Crimea in 2014, and destabilization of Ukraine's east, as well as Russia's hybrid warfare and countless provocations in the neighborhood, are all essential parts of the destructive strategy. For years, Russia has been building its strategic strongholds in the region, challenging existing international order and significantly enhancing its own capability to project power beyond the wider Black Sea region, including into the Mediterranean and Middle East. Fully in line with its expansionist policies, Russia continues to use and manipulate existing conflicts to further enhance its posture and gain advantage vis-a-vis the regional countries in the West. Russia's most recent gains in the region include enhanced military presence in South Caucasus following the recent war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Ironically, the only power interested in escalation and using the conflicts for its own advantage assumes the role of peacekeeper, which in reality means more Russian boots on the ground, limited Western engagement, and Russia's increased military presence and potential growing political and economical influence in a region. The main question to ask is what we can do together with our American and NATO partners to deter Russia's further aggression and expansion and reverse this dangerous trend in a region. Both politically and economically, security-wise, Black Sea remains a top priority for Georgia. It is an anchor of stability and sustainable development and the most essential direct link to Europe for Georgia and other South Caucasian countries. Vital Black Sea is the region Georgians identify, will, and envision their future in increased connectivity and cooperation among the Black Sea NATO member and partner states. Without effective deterrence, we may soon face the reality that Russia has already tested in 2019 and 20, nearly blocking extensive navigation areas of the Black Sea for Georgian and other littoral states under the pretext of naval exercises. In fact, Georgia remains the only country in the region still firmly resisting Russia's continuous pressure and coercion and irreversibly following the NATO path. In this important but turbulent region, Georgia stands as a reliable and capable ally of the US and the West generally. Further enhancing the US-Georgia strategic partnership, the US political engagement and military and economic presence in the region, stepping up Georgia's NATO membership is the only strategically viable move for both Georgia and the West and remains critical for regional security. In fact, it is the only viable solution to the deteriorating security environment in our region. At the same time, accelerating Georgia's NATO membership process would be the most effective response to threats and challenges currently facing in the region. Over the years, we have made significant progress in the process of NATO integration and developed the most comprehensive practical cooperation with the alliance, which is very important but not enough. Now we need out-of-box thinking and bold strategic decisions to advance political dimension of Georgia's NATO membership. That is what needs to be done to stabilize and enhance security in the wider Black Sea and promote peaceful and prosperous development in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I'd now like to give a chance to Mr. Bulan. Does U.S. see Moscow's Black Sea buildup as a problem to address, and if so, how?
Good morning, Ambassador, and thank you for the opportunity to join today. Greetings from the Pentagon. I'm certainly envious of Dr. Kasapoğlu and his Aegean setting, but we're also thinking of our friends in Turkey, Greece, and elsewhere in the region who are facing the wildfires this week, and certainly paying close attention to that situation. Regarding the Black Sea, the security and stability of the Black Sea region are in the U.S. national interest and critical to security of NATO's eastern flank. President Biden reaffirmed this focus in his remarks to the Bucharest 9 summit in May, and reaffirmed U.S. commitment to NATO in revitalizing our transatlantic alliances and partnerships at the NATO summit in June. The Kremlin's Black Sea buildup is certainly concerning. As mentioned already, Russia's ongoing actions in eastern Ukraine, occupation of parts of Georgia, militarization of the Black Sea, provocative actions in the air and at sea reflect Russia's ambitions to regain a dominant position along its periphery and prevent the realization of a Europe that is whole, free, and at peace. Furthermore, Russia's purported annexation of Crimea could be used as a force projection platform to extend its forces further into the Mediterranean and North Africa, as we've also seen over the past year or so. So I'd describe our approach to the Black Sea as comprising 3 overlapping efforts. The first is the alliance effort, where NATO remains strongly committed to Black Sea security. NATO vessels routinely operate in the Black Sea, consistent with international law. And we have an active exercise schedule in which the NATO Standing Maritime Group regularly participates. And I'm sure we'll go into more detail on this issue. Second, bilaterally. And here we have very strong relationships with our littoral allies and partners. Just in the past year, my office has helped negotiate 2 10-year defense cooperation roadmaps, each with Bulgaria and Romania. We continue efforts to build capacity of Ukraine's forces to defend Ukraine from more effectively and to institute critical defense sector reforms. We continue defense modernization efforts in Georgia, and the department has negotiated defense cooperation agreements with Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, Baltic states, and others across the alliance that establish a legal framework for U.S. forces for training and operating from the Black Sea to the Baltic Sea. And then third would be the regional efforts. And here we see a lot of opportunity for deeper regional cooperation among the Black Sea allies and partners themselves. And this will be key to deterring and defending against aggression. Recent examples would include the recent agreement between Romania and Bulgaria on cross-border airspace patrols. We also are encouraged by bodies like the 3 Seas Initiative and Bucharest 9, and certainly by discussions like this one today that will help generate new ideas for cooperation across the region. And then finally, in addition to the threat from Russia, we still face a global pandemic, and we're also heartened by the cooperation we've seen on COVID assistance across the region, across the alliance. And I'd be remiss not to mention the role of the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center, NATO Heavy Airlift Wing Strategic Airlift Capability, and bilateral efforts such as Romania's deployment of medical personnel to its state partner Alabama during the pandemic last year. So as we look at the hard security challenges, we also haven't taken our eyes off the softer security challenge and health challenges that the region and our allies and partners face.
Okay, thank you. Nice comprehensive answer. Okay, Dr. Ullman, you already mentioned in your earlier remarks about the need to, you might say, complicate the Black Sea fleets, the Russian Black Sea fleets, defense problems. So NATO's response to Kremlin provocations has been more comprehensive in the Baltic than the Black Sea. Why? And what, besides what you've already said, should the U.S. do to bolster the defense of NATO's southern flank?
Thanks again, John. And I think this has been a really very informative discussion so far. But we've talked about what's happening rather than what really needs to be done. So let me take your question and broaden it. Let me assert from the very beginning that I do not believe the US, NATO, or the EU has a comprehensive political, economic, and military strategy for the southern flank and for the Black Sea. It's piecemeal. We're doing more exercises, we're doing more air policing, we're doing agreements to transfer arms. But the fact of the matter is we don't have a comprehensive strategy. I think the strategy should have three parts. And let me start with the economic, which may be the most important. If we can dredge the Danube to say 3 or 4 meters and make Constanta into an even more viable seaport, which then will have access across the Black Sea to Georgia and open up all the routes east, that could be a really very, very strong benefit to the region. And I think it's something that the three Cs are trying to do, but it's something I think because some of the funds are already available. Second, in terms of the political and military, I've been arguing for a long time for a porcupine defense. Now, as I said earlier, the reason we focused on the northern part and the northern flank and the central flank is because NATO was not called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization for nothing. During the Cold War, we were fixated on potential attacks from the Soviet Union through the Fulda Gap and the Kola Peninsula, which was really the basis for the Northern Fleet and their strategic nuclear forces. And we continued that emphasis largely because Poland, Germany, and our bigger allies are situated in that part of the world. But a porcupine defense has several elements. First of all, it would put in place defenses which are lower cost, but are also more designed to deny the Russians any opportunity. It would be largely consistent of drones, which are inexpensive, and the Turks have really shown how drones can be used, missiles, mines, and most importantly, electronic deception, disinformation, and misinformation devices. We have to deal a lot more with Russian active measures, which I would argue are probably more difficult and indeed more damaging right now than their military forces. And I think by proceeding with a porcupine-like defense, this would really demonstrate in a defensive way that the alliance is far more serious about what needs to be done in that particular region. And I think we also have to engage. I have argued, possibly with tongue in cheek, that we might suggest revising the Montreux Convention of 1936. I understand the Turkish reaction, but countries that were signatories to it, the Soviet Union, are gone, and countries that were not, namely Georgia and Ukraine, are. And so I think if we even began the idea of discussing the Montreux Convention, which limits warships from non-riparian states to 20 days at most and only 2 at a time, if we even start discussing that, I think that's going to get a reaction, and that might lead to some kind of negotiation, which could ultimately end up with a Minsk III, because the idea here is how do you then reduce tensions in Ukraine? Because if we can do that, then we're going to relax a lot of the issues that are really consuming us in the Black Sea. And so the target ultimately in this regard would be to focus on Ukraine to see if we can get some kind of an agreement that's suitable to all concerned. And one of the mechanisms is going to be diplomatic. And therefore, I think even raising the subject of the Montreux Convention, and in addition, moving more towards a porcupine defense, I think can enhance our diplomatic potential, indeed, of resolving the issue in Ukraine, which to me, it seems to be the most important one at this stage.
Harlan, thank you. That's terrific. I'm going to jump out of the order at the moment to give Dr. Kasapoglu a chance to respond to your idea of talking about revising or having a conversation about revising the Montreux Convention. How do you think that would be viewed in Ankara?
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Actually, I was expecting that after the emphasis to Montreux. I like out of the box and thought provocative questions, and I'm a think tanker, so I would be, my job is to be flexible as to any kind of exercises, analytical exercises like that. But let me give you a snapshot from Ankara and how it's going to resonate with the Turkish statecraft, if you like, any attempts to revise Montreux. I think it would be taken with more than hesitancy, but or a grain of salt. I think it would not resonate very well with the any ruling circles. Ankara. I don't official. I don't mean the officials that are in office right now, but the traditional Turkish approach vis-a-vis Montreux is that the Montreux Convention is one of the biggest gains of the Republic. We shouldn't forget the very fact that between the Declaration of the Republic between 1923 up until Montreux back in 1936, for 13 years, the Turkish state's control and grip over the straits was not as we perceive sovereign or fully extending control and capacity as it is today. So Montreux is seen as one of the biggest gains of the Republic, and the current state of Turkish control over this critical passage actually was actually the result of the Montreux Convention, and it is from Turkish Foreign Office to Turkish military to Turkish governments throughout the time. It is perceived, the Montreux Convention is perceived as one of the biggest gains of the Atatürk era. That's the first thing. The second thing would be a practical reaction from the Turkish Navy to anyone who proposed any revising Montreux Convention, because within the Montreux Convention, I'm not go into details right now, but within the Montreux Convention, third parties like the United States, like other NATO allies that are not literal to the Black Sea, have some limits that they can fulfill as to the displacement of the warships, as to the days that can sustain in the Black Sea, so on, so on. But a practical answer from the Turkish Navy right now, if you ask any Turkish admiral, would be the American Navy, for instance. They didn't even fulfill their limits, and within a year, typically, NATO activity would go between 10% to the 20% of the Montreux limits, and there is the remaining 80% to fulfill. And it is not operating, the NATO allies are not even operating, I mean, the not literal ones are not operating in their full capacity when it comes to Montreux. The third thing that a Turkish Navy officer would, I think, give to you as an answer would be Montreux is not only limiting the outsiders in the Black Sea, but also the Russian Federation and the Russian Navy. Because practically speaking, the Russian submarine operations right now, for instance, from the Black Sea headquarters and the Black Sea dockyards all the way to Tartus, and back to the Black Sea again, and back to their combat missions to Tartus, is an open violation of the Montreux Convention. But still we are silent about that. I also criticize the Turkish admiralty in this silence too. Whenever it comes from the United States, any revision attempts or ideas as to the Montreux, we are so vigilant. But this is a self-criticism of the Turkish elite as well. When it comes from the Russian submarines, we actually tend to keep a blind eye about that. But is Montreux, giving a black check, or revising Montreux would give a black check to the West, or would it also lift all the limitations on the Russian Navy? It's also a good question to think about, I think. And very last point, and again, like as a think tanker, to convey the point of view in Ankara, when a Turkish ambassador, a Turkish admiral or general, or a Turkish member of the government hears the idea of NATO presence in the Black Sea, or we need more NATO presence in the Black Sea, the practical answer would be you have one of the strongest navy of the NATO alliance, the Turkish Navy, already operating in the Black Sea with full cooperation with NATO allies. And why do you need more NATO presence, or what do you mean by NATO presence in the Black Sea. These, I don't want to sing the official song here, but if you rephrase the question, how would the idea of revising Montreux resonate in Ankara? These four major points would be the objections or the caveats that any Turkish official would voice.
Thank you very much. And I know we kind of put you on the spot there, but that was very useful response.
John, could I ask a very brief question? Because I
Okay,
think
go
that
ahead. Go ahead.
it seems to me, and I've argued this before, the Montreux Convention is in contradiction to Article 5. Supposing there's a crisis, how does NATO reinforce through the Bosphorus? And I think that's a question that should not looked at idly. And quite frankly, while the Turkish Navy is indeed a powerful Navy in the region, the United States Navy is far more powerful, obviously.
No, but the Montreux Convention regulations as to the peacetime and wartime, and especially by wartime that Turkey would directly involve, are two different beasts, actually. So if Turkey engages in an Article 5 situation with the Russian Federation in the Black Sea, and if it necessitates an allied build-up in the area of action, then the regulations by the Montreux Convention would not be the same with the peacetime establishment and the peacetime regulations. So what we are talking about here are two different situations. An Article 5 situation pertaining to a Turkish-Russian crisis with a flashpoint in the Black Sea would not be bounded by the Montreux Convention's peacetime regulations.
Thank you. Director General Zidaro, what would Romania like to see NATO do to enhance security in the Black Sea?
In terms of enhancing security in the Black Sea, I believe from Romania's point of view, we would very much like to see a more robust rotational presence, aside from we have already on the ground in Romania. We are working together with our allies in order to achieve this thing. We believe that more enhanced rotational presence on Black Sea shores, it will be beneficial for the alliance as a whole and for demonstrating the unity and the added value of the three allies on the Black Sea shores: Romania, Bulgaria, and of course Turkey, which is a very important ally at the Black Sea coast, and whose participation and contribution to the security dates back in the 1952. I would also like to say that from our point of view, we have a consistent presence on the ground in Romania, and we are working in order to demonstrate the added value in the. I'm sorry, I have sort of an echo. Do you hear me?
We hear you clearly. Please continue.
Okay, thank you very much. What we have seen in the last months in the Black Sea proves that the Allied unity, it is what we have seen in what we have recently seen proves that.
Proves that.
Hello, can you see?
I heard you say proves that. We heard nothing after proves that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, I will try. I will try to start again with the phrase.
Please.
Okay. So in the recent months, we have seen repeated attempts from the Russian Federation around the Black Sea.
You suddenly muted yourself. Please unmute yourself. Now you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you very much. So from our point of view, enhancing the presence in Romania, or a most robust rotational presence. Robust rotational presence would be essential in order to prove the need to enhancing security at the Black Sea shores. from this point of view, we do believe that the alliance will benefit from such a reality. In order to
Order two, please continue.
Oh, this is Peter Gonzalez, the AV technician for this event. Director General, if you remove your headphones and you speak, it might be easier for you to get through it. Because then you won't be hearing your echo.
Please unmute yourself.
okay, okay, let's try like this. Maybe it will be easier.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Hello? Please continue. All right, we clearly have sound problems with the Director General. Let's move to Ambassador Papadorova. What would Bulgaria like to see in terms of NATO presence in the Black Sea and beefing up security? Ambassador, can you unmute yourself? I mean, I'm still seeing you as muted.
Okay, I seem to be unmuted now. I think
Yes.
I'm unmuted. Right.
Yes, please. We hear
Well,
you.
you see, all these views that were just expressed tell you how diverse the situation is in the Black Sea, not just because of Russia, but also among the rest of us. And that creates a very unusual situation. I was so relieved to hear someone mention the neglect on the part of the Alliance for the Black Sea, which is entirely true. For many, many years, I'm afraid the Alliance kind of gave it for granted to Russia. Russia easily and comfortably started claiming the Black Sea and establishing itself in the Black Sea as if it is her own lake indeed. So now it is not easy to take things back to a more balanced situation. What we need now is a balance of forces in the Black Sea, as simple as that. On the other hand, the Montreux Convention is what it is. And it was very nicely and politely explained by our Turkish colleague, but it is all very true. He tried to give a kind of a benign answer to the question about the convention, but I think it is cut in stone and it won't move in the foreseeable future. There is an added complication here. Russia quietly rejoices at its existence, and actually Russia uses the Montreux Convention to its own benefit very well. So the problem is about us. What do we do? So yes, indeed, a more intensive rotational presence, and I would say more diverse. We need to have vessels coming from practically all countries of NATO that possess a fleet, a navy. Which will create a different picture, different impression in the Black Sea and in Russia itself. The other thing which needs to be done is kind of coordinate better the actions of the NATO member states in cooperation with both Georgia and the Ukraine. I'm afraid that uh, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, we've not been very good in kind of acting together for a number of reasons. And I was about to mention that, unfortunately, there was a point in time when a Bulgarian, the lead former Bulgarian prime minister, objected such a naval and military cooperation between the three countries, saying that he wants to see the Black Sea as a sea of yachts and tourism, I don't know, ancient Greece, something like that. So we do have internal controversy, but this is where allies step forward. I think that Bulgaria and Romania should even further intensify their own cooperation, bilateral cooperation. We have to invite Turkey into as many programs as we can, and I hope they would consider these positively. Yes, the Three Seas initiative is so important. It's critical in terms of doing the energy part and the infrastructure part and the digital part. So this is an exercise with more challenges and more tasks than one would imagine. There is another thing, and it comes down to the containment of Russia. How do we contain Russia? It is not possible for smaller countries like Romania and Bulgaria. So definitely we need NATO and we need our allies. So I agree, it must be a multifold effort, bilateral, regional, and on the alliance level.
Thank you very much. Minister Darsalia, how would you like to see greater cooperation between Georgia and NATO? Would you be interested, for example, in NATO having NATO accessible infrastructure? Would you be willing to build it? More intelligence cooperation, more joint exercises. How do you see this?
Thank you. Georgia is an aspirant country, and we strongly believe a future member of the alliance will a direct stake in the Euro-Atlantic security. Contribution to the Black Sea security is one of the key dimensions of Georgia's long-standing engagement in NATO's efforts to strengthen Euro-Atlantic security. Georgia has been deepening cooperation with the alliance on enhancing security in the Black Sea, guided by relevant NATO decisions, including the 2020 Foreign Ministerial decision on package of measures for Georgia and Ukraine. This cooperation continues even during the trying pandemic times. NATO vessels have visited Poti Port in March, in spite of the challenges presented by COVID-19. These decisions resulted in increased number of port calls in the Georgian territorial waters, joint trainings and live exercises, exchange of intelligence and other measures. Importantly, Georgia takes part in the strategic discussions with the Alliance on Black Sea security, shares information and analysis of the current situation in the region with the Alliance on a regular basis in NATO headquarters. Moreover, maritime security is one of the prominent SNGP initiatives. Engagement of NATO and other international partners in the Black Sea region is an important stabilizing and deterrence factor for the security of the region. And naturally, Georgia welcomes the increased deterrence and defense posture of NATO in Black Sea in the recent years. There are ways in which we can further deepen our cooperation on Black Sea security. Georgia has been requesting for years to be engaged in Article 5 exercises, take part in the tailored forward presence, carry out joint Ukraine, Georgia, and NATO live exercises in the Black Sea. We are also keen on stepping up intelligence exchange, including on the activities in the occupied regions of Georgia. We deem it necessary to further increase NATO presence, including through more joint exercises, port calls, and the intensification of interaction between the Coast Guard of Georgia and the standing NATO maritime groups regularly visiting the Black Sea. We also believe that there is a need for comprehensive NATO Black Sea strategy, which would clearly define the interests of NATO in the region and the steps towards enhancing its security. But most importantly, the recent and ongoing regional development that I talked about earlier, and in particular, growing Russia's offensive posture in the region, indicate that there is a need for more decisive and bold strategic decisions. We are seeing that Russia is getting hold of the South Caucasus and Black Sea region, and the West seems to be unable to contain and deter Moscow, let alone get an upper hand in this process. Notwithstanding their relevance and importance, the measures that I have mentioned are not sufficient to contain or neutralize Russia's threat. One might argue that, in fact, stepping up NATO's engagement in the region without offering a meaningful roadmap of the promised membership to Georgia or Ukraine is endangering all the achievements that these countries have had so far in the integration process, as Russia continues to destabilize them through hybrid warfare methods and through manipulation of the unresolved conflicts. In spite of Russia's ongoing hostile and destructive acts against us, we continue to strive towards European and Euro-Atlantic future, which first and foremost means safeguarding and strengthening democratic institutions, values, and achievements. But in this battle, we need tangible and real support of our friends, first and foremost of NATO and US, which is commensurate with the formidable challenge that we face. With Russia's grip tightening over the countries of the region, NATO has to finally embrace the deserving aspirants. It is time for bold decisions. Georgia has to be offered membership. The NATO membership of Georgia will not only ensure the security and democratic development of the country, but it is the only remedy for stabilizing the Caucasus and the Black Sea region with an ensuing benefit for the large Euro-Atlantic security. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bulan, last questions for you before we turn to the audience. You've already talked about the tripartite strategy or approach of the United States to beefing up security in the Black Sea region. Do you think NATO should take steps to complicate Kremlin provocations against Ukraine and Georgia? Thank you.
There's a hot mic. All right.
Yes, please.
Pardon, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Do you think that NATO should take steps to complicate Kremlin provocations against Ukraine and Georgia?
Thank you. Well, the alliance remains strongly committed to Black Sea security, and our force posture from the alliance and from the United States is very key to deterring Russian aggression. As Russia's goals in the region are not static, our force posture must also be regularly readdressed and dynamic to ensure it's making the intended impacts for deterrence that are objectives. I'd say since 2014, NATO has increasingly focused on security of the region, enhanced its presence in the Black Sea. One thing we've done is routinely operate ships in the Black Sea, again consistent with international law. Usually patrolling the waters for around 2/3 of the years as an alliance. For the United States, I think the past data for the past couple of years on our ship presence is something around 90 to 100 days on average per year. And I believe we're also on track for that this year as well. So there certainly can be more that NATO can do to enhance its presence, but we've made a lot of steps and made a lot of progress in the past several years to increase that rotational presence. I mentioned exercises earlier, and NATO nations participate in major exercises such as Sea Breeze, co-hosted by the Ukraine and the United States. National exercises like Breeze 2021, the Thracian series of exercises, and it also highlights the deployment of U.S. fighter aircraft to support Bulgarian air policing late last year, as another example of a more dynamic force presence in the region. Regarding Ukraine and Georgia specifically, of course, at the 2021 NATO summit, President Biden joined all of the allies in reaffirming the 2008 NATO summit declaration that Ukraine and Georgia will join the alliance. And we've continued a strong commitment to providing political and practical support to Ukraine and Georgia, which sends a message both to our partners, but also to our potential adversaries. Ukraine and Georgia have, of course, been granted enhanced opportunities partner status. And this aims to maintain and deepen cooperation between allies and partners. And we have dedicated forums for engaging NATO and our partners via the NATO Ukraine and NATO Georgia commissions. We continue capacity building programs such as the Comprehensive Assistance Package for Ukraine and the substantial NATO Georgia package to further demonstrate NATO's practical support. And we urge all of our allies and partners to enhance their support for Ukraine and Georgia. So I'd note it's not just about the the quantity of assistance or the quantity of our presence, but also the quality of the assistance and the capabilities that we're bringing into the region, and we're also fostering with our close partners, Ukraine and Georgia. And I think an important element of this is, of course, particularly defense reform and modernization efforts, and ability and strengthening the resilience of our partners and allies in the region to resist, again, not just the hard security threats, but the full spectrum of hybrid and gray zone threats that exist in the region.
Thank you very much. All right, we're turning to audience questions. The first one is from Deborah Kagan. Do the panels believe that as a sign of unity and opposition to Russia's Black Sea violations of freedom of navigation and the illegal annexation of Crimea, countries should support sanctions or other punishments against any nation or company that uses the illegally occupied Crimean ports or purchases goods and resources sold by Russia derived from Crimea, or for that matter, Donbass. Anyone want to take this question? A provocative one, to be sure. Lasha, go ahead, please. Minister Darsalia.
I really want to generalize this question. And there, just simply to say that they are definitely, Russia have to know that any its action will have the political price. And that is what the international community have to send the strong message to this, that then this price will be not only symbolic, but really painful. And particularly regarding or particular sanctions or something, but I just generally will say about the principle, that there have to be the principle international community uses, that any violation of international law, any violation of international order will come with great price. And I think this have to be the major guideline of any action. Would it be any particular sanctions or any other decision? So that would be my answer on this.
Okay, thank you. I think Director General Zidata would like to make a statement. Please, over to you. Please unmute yourself.
Very much. I will try to answer the previous question on what Romania would like to see more from NATO.
Okay,
we already have some NATO structures on our territory. I mean, some command and control units that bilaterally and multilaterally exercises, but we need more allied presence, including the US presence on the ground. We have the multilateral brigade in Craiova, but for the time being, we would like also to see some more allied presence in on our territory. We would like to see more allies on a permanent location. I have used the term robust and persistent rotation, and a lot has been done as far as the allied presence on land, on sea, and air. I think that we need more in order to effectively deter Russia in the region. I would also like to mention the fact that a few months ago, Romania launched the Euro-Atlantic Center for Resilience, which is dedicated to increasing the resilience of the allies and of the partners here in the region, clearly proving our interest in order to support the performances and the consolidation of the resilience from what our partners are concerned.
John, can I respond, especially
Please, go ahead.
Both to Irina's comment and peripherally to what Deborah said. I think that our policies have got to be more scalpel-like. I mean, sanctions are a broad instrument, and quite frankly, they don't work. They've got to be refined. But we're talking about increased presence. In my discussions a couple of years ago with the Minister of Defense and the Chief of the General Staff in Moscow, quite frankly, they view many of our naval deployments as irritants. The only thing that gets their attention is when we send in a Tomahawk shooter and Putin is within 1,000-mile range. I guarantee you they are much more sensitive to that than they are to other deployments. So my point here is when we're dealing with the Russians, we need to be more discreet. We need to be more scalpel-like. We need to know what influences them. And quite frankly, when we just use broad-based tools, I don't think that they work. And in some cases, they work against us.
Thank you. We have a question from Dan Freed. He says, I've heard concerns that the Russians could attempt to cut Ukrainian access to the Black Sea by seizing Snake or Serpent Island, or otherwise following the earlier playbook in the Sea of Azov. Is this a realistic concern? Is the US or NATO considering ways to respond to such an action? Anyone like to try that? Very interesting question.
John, I think that Dan is referring to my column last week is Ukraine, Putin's Taiwan. Right. And I've come up with a scenario. I believe if you read Putin's 55,000 word statement that he put out last month, something is going to happen in Ukraine, either in late summer, early fall. And quite frankly, seizing Serpent Island may not sound as foolish as it might be. Serpent Island, for those of you who don't know, is a tiny little island about 20 miles off the mouth of the Danube that belongs to Ukraine. It has about 100 people on it. But the point is that Russia is going to be looking to take some kind of diplomatic initiative that can or cannot be using force. Remember, while their troops did withdraw from that military exercise, they left their equipment behind. So I would suspect something is likely to happen this fall. And it gets back to, does Putin really view Ukraine as a potential Taiwan? I think it's a good question.
Thank you. We have a question from William, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, William Janais. How effective has the Three Seas initiative been to stabilize the region and more firmly anchor it in the West and impeding Russian influence in the region? And we have a question, which is, I say, related to that from Dick Morningstar, which asks about how is security in the Black Sea region related to security in the Eastern Med? Anyone want to try these two questions together?
I might have a try,
Please go ahead, Ambassador
Ambassador Herbst.
Papadotou.
This is Elena
Please.
Papadotou, right, right. Also because I've been engaged with the Three Seas Initiative for a while, and during Bulgaria's hosting the last summit. Well, I would say that it changes the perspective. And this is why Russia is nervous about the Three Seas Initiative. Also, they pro-Russia groups, especially in Bulgaria, were extremely negative towards the whole thing and towards Bulgaria hosting it, and they were even predicting a hot war with Russia over the Three Seas Initiative, which means that we must have hit a strong button, a good button. It is at its beginnings because it needs to accumulate more funds, but the prospects are very good. And with patience and perseverance, the Three Seas Initiative will provide this protection belt, I would call it, along the western coasts of those seas, that will be an additional barrier towards Russia's aggressiveness. So I do place a lot of faith in the Three Seas Initiative. And thank you to America, because without this American support, which is both political and psychological, I would say, and financial, this initiative would not have taken off. The Black Sea security, and I'm so happy to know that Dick Morningstar is also listening to our midsummer thoughts today. It is, I think it does play a role, and it does have an effect to the extent to which these are like connected vessels, and whatever happens here would somehow reflect on the situation in the east because of Russia again. And I think it's a much broader effect. We do refer mostly to military security, to naval security, and the imbalance in the Black Sea. But I always add here energy, and I know that Ambassador Morningstar was very much engaged with the energy issues of the Black Sea region, and we should never divest one from the other. So in a general context, I think, yes, the situation in the Black Sea does have its own impact on the immediate neighboring regions.
Thank you. We have a question.
I also have
Oh, please go ahead.
a few words on the Black Sea. So this represents a concrete and much needed strategic economic footprint in the region, which in our opinion is complementary to the security military dimension of the American presence. It will be like a clear response to the investments in critical infrastructures by other actors who do not share our democratic values and interests. And they are hindering their political and economic influence in Central and Eastern Europe. The projects the Three Seas Initiative are promoting are also dealing with the military mobility, and that will be able to diffuse crisis and add credibility to our calls for de-escalation. These were the core messages the Romanian Minister for Foreign Affairs sent in an op-ed related to the Three Seas Initiative, just had the NATO summit this year. So we are extremely interested in having concrete projects promoted and also realized within the framework of the Three Seas Initiative.
All right, thank you. We have a question about cyber activities by the Russians in the Black Sea area, and what threat does that mean for NATO allies, and for that matter, for Ukraine, for Georgia? Anyone want to take that on?
John, if
Please,
nobody's responding.
Harlan, and then Minister Darsalia, please.
It's not just cyber, it's active measures, it's propaganda, it's influence, economic and otherwise, and the Russians are doing a very, very fine job. As our colleague from the Black Sea noted, in Bulgaria, the property next to hers is owned probably by a Russian oligarch. And so we cannot fail to identify and understand that the Russians are using all means, and they've been very, very good at it. And unfortunately, too often we depend upon the military tool when in fact our strategy has to be far more based on other issues to deal with these active measures, of which cyber and disinformation are among them.
Okay, thank you. Minister Darsali, we know Georgia has been a major target of Russian activities.
Yes, unfortunately. Well, I basically wanted to say that it's not only cyber, but it's part of the wider measures, wider hybrid measures against Georgia. And basically, what I want to say is that normally what Russians use is the weaknesses we have. They don't really invent some new things, but they try to use the weaknesses we have. And it's not only about cyber, but it is about generally when we talk about the hybrid operations against Georgia or any other countries. And solution to this is to increase resilience. One of the key is the cooperation of like-minded nations in this. And no any country alone, when we talk about cyber or any other of that type of attacks, no country alone is possible to deter it. It really needs strong cooperation and build the strong cooperation ties between the like-minded countries to deter it. And maybe not only will NATO allies, but between the countries who are mostly targeted as well, between Georgia and Ukraine, other countries of the Black Sea, and so on. So this would be, I think, one of the first steps which have to be undertaken.
Thank you very much for that. I think that is the final word. We are now at the witching hour. It's 11:15. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us. I apologize to the audience for some of the audio problems that we had. I think we had a wonderful conversation. And I can just tell you that the Black Sea region is very important. It is very much on the policy agenda. And the Atlantic Council and others in Washington will be doing much more work on this in the months to come. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll be back.
Thank you, Ambassador Herbst, and thank you, everybody, both co-panelists and audience.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice
Thank you.
conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.